Apple has had another privacy mess up, some interesting flock updates this week, and Linux might be at 10% usage in North America. All this and more coming up on This Week in Privacy, number 65, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to This Week in Privacy, our weekly series where we discuss the latest updates with what we're working on at Privacy Guides and this week's top stories in the data privacy and cybersecurity space. I'm Jonah, calling in live from Las Vegas this week, and I'm here today with Nate. How are you doing, Nate?
I'm good. How's DEF CON going? You haven't been posting about it too much. I assume you've been busy enjoying it.
You know, it has been pretty busy meeting up with people. It is a very crowded event for sure. A lot of people showing up. And it's an interesting vibe. It's a shame, I think, that it's my first year going because I can't really compare to like older ones. You know, you read about it online. Some aspects of it definitely do feel like more like casual Friday of Black Hat rather than like a hackers convention. It's kind of getting some parts are corporate-y, definitely some uh yeah, a lot of big names in like cybersecurity companies kind of taking over, which I don't think is how it used to be, but I guess I can't really compare because I haven't been to one before this. But yeah, I met Kerry Parker here, Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons, and he kind of gave me a tour. He kind of seems to know everybody here, so there's some perks associated with that. But yeah, it's a fun time so far, and I will have to get back and check more of this stuff out right after this. So it's cool.
For sure. Yeah, I know he's been a few times and he's posted in the past about some of the cool people he's run into. So that's awesome. He's able to show you around and stuff. So
Yeah, he was yesterday for sure, trying to get everything figured out before it started today.
cool.
Um, well, with that, why don't we start out with our first story here? It's kind of a big one I've seen a lot of people talk about this week. Apple's private relay. Turns out it's exposing people's IP addresses, which is the entire thing is supposed to prevent. This is reported by 404 Media. They say a series of issues in Apple's web browser engine, the tech underlying all browsers on iOS, means that Apple's iCloud Private Relay tool, which is supposed to hide a user's IP address, in many cases doesn't actually work. Instead, the issues mean a malicious attacker can set up a website to learn a private relay user's real IP address, or that many websites have also already collected this information incidentally. The issues already impact Onion Browser, which is an iOS app for browsing the web through the Tor anonymity network, according to the researchers who discovered the issues. So Private Relay is an interesting tool because it isn't like a full system VPN in most cases. It usually just works by protecting your IP address in like Safari and other web browsers and in your email client. Now that I'm saying this, I don't remember if you pay for iCloud Plus if it is a full system. I think it is, but if you just have a free plan, it just protects in your web browser and email. But it is supposed to function as like a standard VPN. Uh, in terms of like hiding your IP address, they have a kind of a anonymity setup where you're going to connect to Apple's servers, and then they will route that to um, a, a CDN servers. Basically, they're partnered with Cloudflare. I believe they're also partnered with Fastly and Akamai. So they have a couple different network partners. But the idea is that the people who are exiting the traffic on this can't see who you are because you're going through Apple servers first, and then Apple can't see what websites you're visiting because that's separated. So kind of similar to like Obscura VPN, basically, but more big tech like. But yeah, in theory, it's supposed to function the same way, and it's supposed to be protection for your IP address. So the fact that it is leaking all of that information because of this bug is absolutely an issue. Um, and the thing that leaked the IP addresses in this case, according to this article, they say it was due to how passkeys are implemented in browsers. So they say that passkeys, a user's device is going to make a web request outside of the browser itself, and then that request essentially bypasses private relay and it exposes a user's real IP address, even though when you're doing that and you're using a passkey, it looks like you're just browsing the web normally when you're normally protected. So kind of a huge issue with the whole thing. I know we had some discussion topics on here. What do you think we should tackle first, Nate?
Oh man. Yeah, so um I guess my first thought is, if I were an Apple user, I would be like, okay, but what about like a regular VPN? Like uh if I'm a Molvad user, Proton user, would that protect against this by any chance? Or
Yeah, so the researchers say, and this seems to be true, if you're using like a full system VPN that is protected, so it should protect all of your traffic as normal. This is just a quirk with private relay specifically. Of course, iOS has had problems with VPNs in the past and them not working entirely perfectly. So there definitely have been a lot of networking related issues in the Apple space. I know that this is a big problem, even on Mac OS where they're trying to get uh, VPN developers basically to switch to like their new network extensions rather than just messing with the kernel firewall tables. And those have had leaks, or like certain Apple services are allowed to bypass the VPN if you're using the official system tool. So yeah, it's probably not quite as tight as a lot of people would like, but in this case, in theory, they have said that a full VPN is not affected by this. It's just the private relay implementation.
cool. Yeah, I was definitely thinking about that too with the Apple history thing. I think, yeah, I feel like at this point, kind of, I mean, I know some people probably get tired of hearing of it, but we're real big fans of graphene back here. And I think this is probably why, is because graphene really goes out of their way to try to fix things like this. Like even, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like Molvad discovered that there was a very, I would say a relatively minor issue with the way that Android handles, VPNs and something about the tunneling and the connectivity checks. And they reported it to Google, but Graphene went ahead and like disabled it anyways until it actually got fixed, if I remember correctly. So, um,
Yeah, definitely a reason to use something like graphene. It's a weird situation where I think we've just seen a lot in like the mobile phone space where none of these are like super perfect options, especially with networking. They're kind of like built to be always connected surveillance machines. So there's only so much you can do, but Graphene OS definitely does the most for sure.
cool, cool. I guess the last thought that I had written down here is there anything else that users can do to defend themselves besides switching to graphene or using like a system-wide VPN? Because I know my first thought when I was reading that story is I have seen, mostly on mobile, weirdly, I don't get this as much on desktop, but I've definitely gone into websites on mobile where all of a sudden it'll pop up and it's trying to access my passkey, and I'm just like, I'm not even trying to log into anything. What are you doing? You need to calm down. So sometimes like people don't even have a choice. They just navigate to a site and it pops up. So I don't know. Is that maybe like a setting or something, or is there anything you can think of?
That's it. I haven't seen that as a setting, unfortunately, unless you just disabled autofill entirely, but then I don't know if you'd be able to use passkeys at all. I think in this case, it's definitely just use a VPN if you need to keep that information safe, especially if you're a free iCloud user. The amount of stuff that iCloud Private really doesn't protect is pretty wide in terms of it compared to a VPN, which is going to protect everything, because Private Relay is mainly to protect against regular web browsing, email browsing, and then it protects like unencrypted connections apps might make, which is pretty rare anyways, but in a lot of cases it doesn't operate unless you pay for it. So VPN is typically going to be the best move for sure.
Fair enough. Yeah, I do think the iCloud private relay architecture is interesting because don't they? You may have mentioned this. It's like a two-hop VPN between iCloud servers and either like Cloudflare or Akami,
Yeah.
and But at the same time, a lot of the VPNs we recommend, like Proton and Mulvad, they also have that same architecture as an optional feature. So yeah. But yeah, I think that's kind of all my questions on that one. Did you have any other thoughts that we didn't get to?
It was a kind of a weird situation how this was reported to Apple because this was discovered by Misk. Is that correct? I don't remember for
Misk,
sure.
yeah, MYSK. I think that's how you
Yeah,
pronounce it.
yeah, and I remember they posted this on Twitter, kind of just releasing this information publicly instead of reporting it to Apple. I know that they said they worked with the Onion browser developers and Tor project to make sure they kind of coordinated a bit. But we've talked about like reporting vulnerabilities before, and according to Misk, they were concerned about reporting this to Apple and then Apple not doing anything about it because apparently that's happened in the past where they just drag their feet and take years or months or whatever. Um, but I think it's a really I still think it was a kind of an irresponsible move on their part because if they're going to coordinate with other projects anyways and they're going to give some people disclosure, they might as well send that to Apple. When you report like a security vulnerability like this, you don't have to listen to whatever Apple tells you and like hold on to this forever and don't tell anyone. You can just say, um, here's the vulnerability. I'm going to publish it in 90 days, right? And you don't have to communicate with Apple after that, but they could have given them some heads up. So I think that's kind of an unfortunate move in this case. And I think it probably leaves some people at risk since it's not public. Have you seen whether Apple I think they did address this, but I don't remember for sure.
Honestly, I haven't seen anything. I have not heard anything since this initial article was published.
Maybe I'm mistaken then.
I mean, you could be right. I know I don't really follow Apple's releases that closely. I know there are some people that'll send me news articles that are like straight from Apple's blog, but I tend to get it filtered through like
Oh,
my RSS feed, at different outlets and stuff. So I just haven't seen anybody report on it, but it's possible that Apple has said something and I just haven't seen it myself.
no, I guess they told 404 Media that they're investigating it, but they haven't actually done
Of
anything
course. Of course they are. You always got to investigate.
Hopefully. Yeah.
All righty. Yeah, I think that's all we've got on that story for now. Why don't we pause real quick and take a minute? And we don't really have a lot of questions yet since we just started, but here in our in our thread on the forum, we haven't had any questions yet. But here in the live chat, Pooh Bear said, "I didn't even know it's possible to go live on Twitter." Yeah, welcome. We try to go live on as many platforms as we can to try and reach as many people as possible. But yeah, I'm glad you got the notification. And you said hopefully this will be fixed before iOS 27. Yeah, that would be really nice. But yeah, we'll just keep you guys updated. I mean, last time 404 wrote a story about an Apple vulnerability, they fixed it pretty quick. So I'm hopeful the same thing will happen here.
Yeah.
If that's all we've got for now on these stories, I think we're gonna hop over to some Flock stories here next. So
Oh boy.
we're yeah, I know. We're so every so often we get these batches of stories and we kind of just get, to be honest with you guys, we kind of get tired of talking about them after a while. Like we got really burned out on talking about age verification, but unfortunately they're important stories and we have to talk about them. And that's kind of how we are with Flock right now. Every week there's like new reporting coming out about how this stuff is being abused. And this one comes from 404. It says cops use Flock to track a man across state lines to create pretext to search his car for weed. Which this really baffles me. So this man, I don't remember if it said his name. Yeah, Edward Abrams Phillips was already wanted for bail jumping. So he was arrested for domestic violence charges. They posted bail, and for those who don't know, excuse me, bail means that you pay a certain amount of money determined by the judge, and then you are free. Like, you don't have to sit in jail until your trial date. You're free to go about your life. But if you don't show up again, you lose that money. If you show up, you get your money back. If you don't show up, you don't get your money back. So this dude already jumped bail, which tells me he probably has too much money because bail's not supposed to be cheap. But for some reason, instead of just going out and arresting him, the cops looked at his travel patterns and noticed that he frequently travels to Michigan, where weed is legal. And like, for the record, I don't want to defend this guy because domestic violence charges, jumping bail, and it's a zero tolerance state. Like, if you're going to go to Michigan and smoke weed in Michigan. Don't bring it back with you. Like, everyone knows that if you go to a zero tolerance state, like it's what it means. Like, they will arrest you for having something that's illegal. You can't buy something. You can't go to like, I'm trying to think of a country where like everything is legal. I think there's a country in Europe where like all drugs are legal. You can't go there and buy cocaine and then come back to the US and be like, well, it was legal there. Yeah, but it's not here. So anyways, I just want to point out, like, I admit that this dude was in the wrong here, but it's the fact that they didn't just go and get him for the one thing. They like went and looked at his travel patterns and they're like, oh, he goes to Michigan all the time. I bet you he comes back with weed. We should pull him over next time he comes back from Michigan, which is exactly what happened. So I'm actually not signed in here. I apologize, but I'm going to switch back to my notes where I wrote this down. So yeah, the searches came to light in a criminal complaint against Abram Phillips. And the complaint makes it clear that beyond bail jumping and charges, the domestic violence charges, police specifically studied his interstate travel to create a pretext for searching the car for marijuana. Ironically, the bail jumping charge was dismissed, but he was found guilty of the weed possession in the car. They said in their statement on what happened, they said that police detected the odor of what he knew to be raw marijuana after they pulled him over. So, yeah. And then just kind of an interesting statistic from this article. They said that flock audit reports covering searches done by the Brown County, Wisconsin Sheriff's Department from April 26, 2025 show that the flock department used shows that the department used flock dozens of times that day, often searching thousands of flock cameras at a time, though it is not clear which specific searches were done for Abram Phillips' car because many of the searches simply list warrant or traffic INV. My brain is blanking on what that means, but as the reason. So yeah, they went through and searched. I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of going in circles here, but it's so crazy to me. So let me go ahead and jump into the next article real quick, and then we'll come back and kind of discuss these as a whole. So this next one is also flock related, and it says that cities are ditching flock and immediately replacing it with Axon license plate readers. So once again, I'm not signed in here. Let me read off my show notes. A handful of cities across the U.S. have ditched Flock's automatic license plate reader cameras and immediately replaced them with equivalent systems from contracting giant Axon. Axon advertises. I am so sorry. I don't know why I can't talk today, y'all. Axon advertises AI-powered cameras that attach to an existing street lamp and are designed to completely blend in with their surroundings, which is I just want to throw that out there. To me, that's a little bit worrying because not that I'm condoning it, but I know there are people who will go out and like cover up flock cameras or like cut them down, which that's illegal. I'm not condoning that. But it's like, well, now we can't do that. And now we can't even see them. Like, you can see a flock camera right now. Once you look up what they look like, you're like, oh, I've seen those around. You're not supposed to see these, which to me is, I don't know. I always find the hypocrisy of the surveillance industry really fascinating, that they're like, oh, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to fear. But then, you know, Flock will tell cops, like, don't mention that you used a Flock camera in this investigation. It's, I don't know. I'm tired of the hypocrisy. But anyways, so they give a list of cities that have already switched, which includes Syracuse, Denver, Grand Chute, Wisconsin, Douglas County, Colorado, Ferndale, Michigan, Longmont, Colorado, and Knoxville, Tennessee. Probably some others out there. They said that as for why cities are switching, local cops performing lookups for immigration and customs enforcement, data sharing, and flock cameras sometimes being down or unavailable all come up in media reports and documents. That is actually something I mentioned on the show before. I have a friend who works in law enforcement, and he's mentioned that before, that a lot of the time, not enough, unfortunately, but he's like, yeah, we have vendors coming to the department all the time that like, oh, check out this awesome new surveillance technology. And we'll do like a 30-day trial and be like, yeah, this sucks. We're not buying it. Like, so I guess that's the one thing, is a lot of these companies are so inept that the police don't even want to keep the contract. But unfortunately, when they do, it spreads like wildfire. So there is one silver lining to Axon that was listed here in the article. And it says that Axon does not have a national network. It would not be possible for cops in one jurisdiction to search cameras across the country. Police departments using Axon can enter into data sharing agreements with each other, though. In Axon's documentation for its ALPR product, a shared data option extends the query to partner agency detections once a sharing relationship is active. So I will say that I think that's slightly better, that this is not on by default and instead you have to opt into it. And I do wonder if you have to opt into like, I want to share with this neighboring county since we're so geographically close and people travel back and forth a lot, or is it just like I opt in and now everybody can share? I don't think the article specified that. Axon also partners with surveillance doorbell company Ring. I like how they worded that, to let Ring customers share video with law enforcement. Flock and Ring recently canceled a similar arrangement after massive backlash. If any of you remember that wonderful, wonderful Super Bowl commercial. And then it goes on to talk about this system called Fusus. Axon essentially brings all this data together in Fusus, which started as a system in a company that linked together a city or town security cameras and then added AI capabilities to them and let query police all that data at once. 404 Media has previously reported on Fusus and how it was spreading across the country. In 2024, Axon acquired Fusus. And I will say in the article here, I love that they mentioned this. They said, of course, none of this changes the basic fact of how ALPR cameras work, which constantly scan all passing vehicles regardless of which vendor runs them. Switching vendors does not address the more fundamental issue of whether such technology should require a warrant or not. So, yeah, I think that kind of covers our underlying problems with this kind of stuff. Jonah, before I move into any additional thoughts on these stories, did you have any of this that jumped out at you that you wanted to focus on?
Yeah, I feel like the last time we talked about a company other than Flock, I said this, but I feel sometimes like in all of these industries, in the ALPR industry here, for example, there's always like one bad guy who's going to get a lot of public attention. And in that case, it's Flock, and they're kind of absorbing the hit basically. But then we see companies like Axon and Motorola and all of these other the other companies that you mentioned in the article, kind of quietly moving in, and it's under the radar because there's so many campaigns about like deflock. That's what people are looking up. They're like, are there flock cameras in my town? And that sort of thing isn't going to immediately show up if your town or city is working with a different company necessarily, unless you're looking into ALPRs in general. The entire technology is it's crazy that it's expanding so quickly and it's being used for obviously illegal purposes in a lot of cases, or to create these pretexts or to find out things about people just for personal reasons. It just gives the police a lot of power that they don't need to have, and it's it's concerning. It's just like the first case you talked about. I know you had in the notes here, and maybe you can expand on this a bit, but like in that first case where he was traveling to Michigan where weed is legal and then back to Wisconsin where it's not, that person was also wanted for other crimes. You said he had a warrant out for bail hopping, so they were already after him. And someone might ask, like, if they were looking at him anyways, why is like surveilling him with these flock cameras bad? And maybe you can expand on that a bit, Nate.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of worrying because it's one of those things where in all areas of life, if you go looking for problems, you can usually find them. Like whatever you look for is usually what you find. And it's really worrying that, like, unfortunately, I think this is something cops tend to do a lot. As a true crime nerd, I see this a lot where like the cops will, they'll charge somebody with a bunch of certain offenses, but they won't charge with the other ones. And it's kind of a strategic move because it's like, well, this is more like the lawyers make this call, but it's a strategic move because then like what happened in this story, it's like, oh, if he gets away with this thing, we have these other charges that we can introduce to try to get him on. But it's just really worrying that they're like using this as an opportunity to, like, what else can we get this guy on? Because that is one way to look at it, is that it's a strategic thing to make sure, like, okay, we're going to make sure this bad guy stays off the streets. Excuse me. But it could also be used just to like bury somebody. If you like there's we've seen stories about people who get like multiple life sentences. And again, sometimes there's a legal justification there. Well, if they get parole one time, they still have 5 more life sentences. But sometimes it's literally like 5 life sentences with no possibility of parole. And it's like, okay, you're just making a point here, which again, a lot of the time those people are usually like murderers or something, but it's just so worrying that you can go back and find anything that anybody does And the slightest little like jaywalking or whatever, it's really, and like, I hate saying stuff like this because it sounds very fear mongery, but one interesting thing, and this is regardless of how you feel about the current political administration in America, but um, a lot of people, smarter people than me that I listen to, point out that when an authoritarian government rises to power, it is very common for them to retroactively punish things. So one sign of a functional democracy is that when we introduce a new law and we say, okay, this is illegal now, moving forward, this is illegal. If you did it in the past, whatever, but now it's illegal. And if we live under this surveillance state where everything is recorded all the time and everything is documented all the time and every little thing, then in the future, when it's like, okay, now this is illegal, and now we can go back and see every time you've done it for the last 10 years and we can nail you to the wall with that. It's just, there's just so much potential for abuse here to find every little tiny irrelevant, unimportant thing that anybody has ever done. And like, oh, well, now we can go, sorry, not to ramble too much, but I just remember like the story we talked about last week with Germany and free speech. It's like, oh, well, now we can go and get you for this tiny little tiny thing that what we're really getting you for is A, but A is not illegal, but we found B, so we'll go and get you for B instead. And either way, it gets you to shut up and gets you off the street, and that's all we care about. So yeah, it's one of those things where like I'm sure you've seen like the crazy laws, like you can't have a giraffe on a leash on Sundays, and just these ridiculous laws that it's like, yeah, we're all breaking laws constantly because nobody even knows these things are on the books because they're from 150 years ago. But now we can go dig these up and we can throw you in jail for, drinking a soda on a Monday with tennis shoes on. And
Well, and
it's
even
scary.
not even things that are like illegal. It could be things that are legal now and illegal later. Exactly like you were saying before about future regimes. We were just talking in Signal about the placement of flock cameras, right? And like where they are being installed. I think there were in Michigan, like outside marijuana shops specifically, is where they're being posted. So that
Yeah,
is
that first article talked about that.
yeah, it's it's very concerning, I think, that that sort of like, who knows what other places are being monitored right now that are on, like, on a list to be monitored in the future, just for future use, right? They're kind of preemptively, getting all of this data, and then what they'll do with it later, who knows, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's just there's so many different ways it can be abused. And I want to point out that like I've said this before, is like a lot of people, um, more so the quote unquote normies who aren't like super into privacy, a lot of the time people don't think about all the bad things that could be used because they're not bad people. Their brains don't go there. They don't think about like, oh, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And yeah, so it's really hard for people to wrap their heads around that just because they don't think about this kind of stuff. So I don't know. Yeah, it's a scary, scary future we're moving into.
Yeah.
But, I think we did have a quick a forum post we wanted to throw in here, unless you had something else you wanted to add.
Sure. Yeah, I did see this posted on the forum just a couple of days ago. Haven't looked too much into this because it's quite a long thread and I've been busy this week, but there's 57 posts on here. But the story is basically Proton seems to be working on their own web browser, which I think has been rumored a bit that's been off and on for a while, whether they're gonna do that and whether people think that they should do that. I know that I've seen it in like their surveys they do about like what product should we make next. A web browser is usually an option on there. So the forum post linked to an article from tweakers.net, which I think is in Dutch, but we can translate it. They
I have a
basically said
translated
that
version shown up on screen.
yeah, they posted a job vacancy, it looks like, that they are looking for developers to build a privacy-friendly browser. And I think that's the only information we know about it. The vacancy indicates that it will be based on Chromium, which makes sense because they're looking for people with experience with building and maintaining Chromium-based browsers. Proton is they're an interesting company. And they're obviously trying to build like a whole ecosystem around privacy and security and kind of be a Google workspace alternative for a lot of people, and the browser is gonna be a big part of that. But at the same time, we always talk about like browsers, they are a huge developmental commitment. It just takes a lot of resources to maintain these things. And the advantages of something like that versus like, I don't see why they wouldn't partner with somebody else who's already doing this, like Brave, for example. I feel like they obviously want to get people to stop using Chrome with Proton products because uh, that has problematic implications for all of their stuff. You gotta kind of own the platform that you're on, and you're directly competing with Google. Um, but at the same time, like there are other browsers out there and other Chromium based ones, and it does feel like a bit of a duplication of effort on my part when Proton could be tackling other things that Google does in the Google Workspace ecosystem, um, besides Google Chrome. Uh, yeah, I I definitely want to read this forum thread when I get a chance because I want to know what everyone else thinks. But Nate, do you have any thoughts about whether they should even be doing this at all?
I mean, I will say I'm happy that it's not a messenger. um, yeah, I mean, I'm not totally against this, but I'm also with you. Like, is this really a desperately underserved area? Because we do have Brave, like you said, we do have Firefox, and we even have forks of those. You know, we have Helium, we have LibreWolf, we have like the Molvad browser. Like, we have so many browsers
Hmm.
um, that I think it's a pretty well served area, to be honest. And there was one person here who pointed out that like it would also be nice if Proton would just fix their existing products, like their VPN tool for Linux is notoriously garbage, and there's I don't even think there's a drive client for Linux yet. There's like a CLI client, but
Yeah,
there's just so many other
finally.
areas. I mentioned this recently that their calendar really needs like a tasks thing. Like that's the one thing my wife is waiting on to switch off of Google Calendar. And so I don't know. Yeah, it's very again, it's not a messenger. Like I think there's a lot of worse things. Or I've criticized Firefox in the past for buying that like fake review spotting plugin that it's like, what does this have to do with the browser? And so it's not like the most out of character thing, but yeah, I definitely think there's better places here that they could have put their energy. Pooh here said like Chromium with a sad face or an annoyed face, or is that like shaking your head? I think. I will say, yeah, like honestly, what I would have preferred to see, if anything, I would love to see Proton team up with Firefox or Mozilla to try and improve Firefox and make it a little bit more competitive. Like I feel like Firefox has really come a long way, and I think there was actually another forum thread about this that I was looking at earlier today that I can't remember. Um, but yeah, I mean, it still lags behind Chrome, especially with a lot of security features. And Proton has, I think, enough resources behind them that if they were to team up, which I would argue Mozilla probably does too if they would spend their money better. But still, it'd be cool to see them team up and like, hey, instead of just like doing yet another Chromium fork, like what if we help improve the Firefox ecosystem and make it a lot more competitive? So
It
yeah,
does
not
occur to
not the worst
me
thing, but
there aren't a lot of EU-based browsers, European. I think Vivaldi is one. Mulvad, you could
that's a
say
good point.
technically is one, but I think Mulvad browser is pretty much developed by Tor Project almost entirely, and that's American. I wonder if that's what they're going to be angling for, because I think that they have been like, we're not only are we private and secure, like we're the privacy and security ecosystem, but we're also like the EU Google Workspace alternative. And maybe that is what they're imagining. I don't. Maybe opera might be European too, but like Vivaldi, opera, I don't know how many
I
people are
think
using
Opera
those.
is, yeah.
Proton could definitely like make an impact there, and I could see that angle. I don't necessarily agree with the whole EU specific thing because like good technology is good technology. But I know that's a big thing. So yeah. I feel like there's obviously going to be a lot of people. I don't know if this will make a lot of sense for individuals, but like for businesses, I know businesses typically want an all-in-one solution to all of this technology stuff. But I think that there are things that Proton could focus on besides a web browser that would help businesses more. Um, there's just so many like enterprisey features in like Google Workspace, for example, like device management and that sort of thing. So what this is going to add for businesses is not super clear to me. I don't know. I guess it just depends on how fast Proton can make this and whether it'll affect their other products. They typically claim that it won't, but it also seems like Proton is quite slow to do a lot of things that other apps have implemented fairly quickly into like a solid like other apps have built solid implementations of all of this stuff, and Proton seems to take forever to do various things that people are looking for whatever reason. So yeah, I don't know if it's the right move, but hopefully if they do this, it's at least not going to impact their other products.
Yeah, for sure. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens here. But do you have any Found Dog here said Proton X Ladybird. Do you have any opinion on the Ladybird browser that everybody's been talking about?
You know, I've never used it. It like in
I
theory
don't I don't
is
think it's
it's neat to have a don't they have a download or no? I thought it was like
I
a
was gonna
very
say
early
I think if they do, it's like a very like you have to compile it. Like it's definitely not like a go
yeah,
and download it and use it kind of thing.
right. But yeah, I know that they keep kind of pushing at it. I don't know how close they are, honestly, because I don't really follow the news, especially because you can't really use it. I'll just wait. Yeah, to me, um, like it's neat, but to say whether something is good or not, you have to see what it actually is and not just what things are promising. I think that that is the case for all tech stuff. So I'm not going to take their, future promises as word and like have a judgment on it yet. But hopefully, I do want it to come out because it would be cool to check out. I think it is cool the idea to Chromium and Gecko. I know there's also the Servo project that I believe is still developed. I don't know what exactly their goals are, whether they're trying to make a full web browser or if they're just trying to make an Electron alternative. But either way, I think that would be cool as well. So between those two projects, I think there could be some cool stuff coming to the web browser space,
Cool.
but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
I don't know if I cut out.
you did for a split second. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't. I feel like a lot of the engine stuff is like really technical and goes over my head. And I'm with you. I definitely don't. I'm not comfortable with the fact that there's basically only two players. Asterisk is kind of only two players. There's really kind of one, but Firefox is hanging in there for now. But yeah, I'm with you. Like I'm kind of getting a little annoyed personally that it's like there's so much hype and it's like there's not even a product yet. Like I will also be interested to see what it actually looks like when it comes out myself. So,
Yeah.
but all
And
right,
Found Dog says
um,
they're targeting a alpha beta later this year. Yeah, that'll be cool.
cool.
We'll see.
Yeah,
They also said they would love to see CalDev and CarDev supporting their bridge. You see, like that's the sort of thing that like a business would probably need. Or like obviously I would like that as well just as a person. But like something like a bridge service for that you could run as a business for like multiple users, like if you host it yourself. But like all of your normal web clients, like I don't know, Microsoft Outlook or Apple Mail or whatever people in businesses use could connect to Proton without like needing special software if you had like a centralized server, but also like all of your stuff in Proton's cloud on their servers is still secure. Like that would be something that I think a business would appreciate, and I highly doubt that they're going to work on anything like that, but that's the sort of thing where there are more tools, even in their existing products, that I think people will want to would like to see improved or would like to see implemented that they haven't yet. But they continue to branch off into new ventures. I've never used like Proton Lumo or Proton Wallet, except when I did an initial review of Proton Wallet where I didn't like it because it was a weird Bitcoin specific, like I don't know, they had a weird philosophy about cryptocurrency. Um, so like all of the stuff that they're expanding into has not really been super exciting for me, and I don't think I'm going to be convinced to switch web browsers even if Proton releases this personally. They would have to do something pretty fantastic that no other browser does, which I doubt that they will do, especially given their track record of implementing features that people want.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, I haven't used Proton Wallet. It would be cool if they could expand it into like a Venmo kind of thing where it's like, oh, we go out to dinner and I can like send somebody $20, but like not in Bitcoin. That's not feasible for me. But I know I've said this before. I've been using Lumo a lot more ever since the 2.0 release. It's actually gotten really good, but um, you know, it's not for everybody. Not everybody likes AI, and I understand why, and I respect that. I wouldn't even say
Yeah.
I like it. I just find uses for it. But yeah, I'm with you. I
Uh,
can't imagine what they could possibly bring to the browser space that would be unique and not already being served.
I have no clue. I saw Pooh Bear in the chat said, I even want Microsoft to bring Internet Explorer back. I don't know if I'd go that far, okay? That was a bad time. ActiveX scripts. No. Java. That was crazy. I think the problem with Microsoft, and I'm actually kind of glad that they switched to Chromium. It's like the one specific case because Microsoft likes to do things that only Microsoft is allowed to implement, like ActiveX, for example, in the Internet Explorer days. They do a lot of weird stuff with like Microsoft Office as well, where they had like that open standard and then they added a bunch of stuff that only they can do. They do that with all sorts of stuff, and that sort of thing definitely hinders the ecosystem quite a bit. Whereas these open source projects, like if Ladybird does something cool, at least other browsers would have the option to implement it. So there some competition in that sense would make sense. Um and maybe Bob Zirinkle says sometimes I miss Adobe Flash. Honestly, there were some good games on Adobe Flash. I'm kind of glad to be rid of it, but there is some stuff that, I would miss, I would say. Honestly, I feel like the downfall of Adobe Flash kind of coincided with, we talked about this in, I think, previous episodes. But there aren't like, when we talk about age verification stuff, there aren't a lot of like children's spaces on the internet anymore. There's not like, is there a Club Penguin sort of similar thing? There's nothing like that. All the kids are just playing Fortnite, right? Which is
I was gonna say they're all into
sort
like
of falling.
Roblox and
Or
stuff, but
Roblox, yeah. And all of these are just like huge platforms that anyone will play, and there's not really a lot of moderation. And I think that
cool
that's
math games,
unfortunate.
Jordan.
Cool math games. And I think part of that was, well, I don't know. I think social media caused a bit of that because I think kids get like FOMO now if they're not on the latest and greatest PS5 that all their friends have or whatever. But also like I think when Flash died, there were just a lot of those sites who were like, well, we're not gonna completely rewrite our entire game in HTML or whatever. So we're just gonna kind of shut down, right? And I think that was kind of an unfortunate side effect of that. But overall, also Flash wasn't great. I mean, it was better than Silverlight. Anyone play a Microsoft Silverlight game? That was that was a crazy time.
I remember being annoyed every time I had to install Silverlight for like one specific use case or whatever. It's just like, what even is this? So
Yeah, I think
I miss Encarta. If I could bring back anything from like the early 2000s and the 90s, that's what I miss.
trying to remember. I think I
Alrighty.
used a world
Our
book.
next story, World Book. I don't think I
Sorry,
had that.
just thinking
I
of
don't know what.
encyclopedias in Carta. I don't remember what it's called.
No,
Maybe it was
yeah,
a
no. Well,
thing.
okay. So honestly, Encarta, I mean, aside from like the visual like layout of like click things and it would expand into a web, and like aside from that, it had this game where it was basically a trivia game, and you got into the next room by correctly answering a question, and you had to like get to the end of the maze, and like oh my god, I lost so many hours playing that as a kid. I mean, granted, admittedly, I was a little bit sheltered, so I didn't really have much else to do, but I genuinely loved that game. It was a lot of fun, and I miss it.
That
I would play that again in
is
a
funny.
heartbeat. So, um, did you want to take this next pasta key story, or you want me to tackle this one?
Sure. Yeah, this is reported by Bleeping Computer. Passkey attacks let malware hijack Google synced passkeys. So the article says a new report by Palo Alto Networks Unit 42 demonstrates 3 novel attacks against passkeys, collectively called passkey, that target Google Password Manager in Chrome on Windows devices equipped with a Trusted Platform Module, or TPM. All 3 attacks require malware to already be running on the victim's computer and do not break the cryptography used by passkeys. Instead, they exploit weaknesses in how Chrome and Google's Cloud Authenticator handle device trust, onboarding, recovery, and synced credentials. The first technique, named passkey, allows unprivileged malware to impersonate a trusted device and request a valid authentication response for one of the victim's passkeys. They say the malware abuses Chrome's TPM-backed device integrity key to sign a request sent to Google's Cloud Authenticator. This can be done without administrative privileges, user interaction, biometrics, or unlocking the device. All of that is concerning because typically when you're using a passkey, they would request one of those things to require physical presence, basically. That's a major advantage of passkeys or security keys in a lot of cases. So bypassing all of that stuff is not great. So when that happens, Google's Cloud Authenticator treats the request as coming from the victim's trusted computer, and it includes a user verified tag which indicates whether biometric or PIN verification occurred. So if a service requests that flag, basically, if they check whether biometric or PIN verification occurred, it will say that it didn't. So GitHub, for example, is one that they checked, which properly does check that user verified flag, and then the attack did fail against that. But other sites, like eBay, for example, they were able to successfully attack. eBay theoretically is supposed to require user verification. They have that set up, but it did not properly validate that flag, indicating whether that verification occurred. eBay has fixed that issue after it was reported. So that is a problem I think we're going to see with a lot of sites, where even if that is required, implementation problems are going to cause issues there. The second technique that the researchers found was named silver passkey, and it goes further by allowing attackers to register their own user verification key with Google's Cloud Authenticator. The attacker would first use malware on the compromised device to force Chrome to re-register it by invalidating its existing verification key or deleting the local file containing its passkey state. During that re-registration process, the attacker can register a user verification key they control because the Cloud Authenticator does not validate whether the new key originated from trusted hardware. Google will then accept requests which are signed with the attacker's key as proof that the victim unlocked the device using a PIN or biometrics, which then allows the attacker to access accounts that do properly require and validate that user verification. Once that key is registered, the attacker can authenticate from another system without needing further access to the victim's computer. The third and most severe technique, which they call golden passkey, allows malware to obtain the master key that's used to encrypt all passkeys which are synced through the victim's Google Password Manager account. This master key, known as the security domain secret, is temporarily sent to Chrome when a device registers or recovers access to the account. So Unit 42 initially found that Chrome exposed the secret in plain text through its internal FIDO logs. Google removed that secret from the logs after the researchers reported that issue, but it is still sent to Chrome and it remains temporarily accessible in the browser's process memory. So an attacker can still theoretically grab that key if they have malware on the device and like a passkey is being added and that key is in memory. The attacker can then use the stolen master key to decrypt the victim's synced passkey records and recover their private keys. Those private keys can be transferred to another system and used to impersonate the victim and sign into their accounts. They warned that the stolen master key could also be used to decrypt future passkeys which are synced to the account. Google's current implementation reportedly provides no way to rotate or revoke that key, so current and future passkeys are going to be protected by that same encryption key. Lot of crazy stuff. It is important to note, and the researchers noted this as well, passkeys are still going to remain significantly more secure than traditional passwords, especially passwords which are synced in Google Password Sync, I would say, because if you're going to have bad protection, there are a lot of benefits that passkeys are still going to provide. The researchers recommend that websites require and properly validate that user verification. They also recommended Google basically fix all of those other problems with how the keys are stored and registered on devices. Um, so yeah, a lot of stuff to unpack, a lot of issues. I think this is all Windows specific, so the first lesson is obviously just don't stop using Windows, you guys. It's we know it's not secure, and it has been annoying to me for a while that Google's credential manager it integrates with the credential manager that Windows has built in basically on Windows devices. So they're kind of offloading a lot of that security to Microsoft setup rather than doing it themselves, and I think that that's probably where some of these problems lie. But anyways, um, yeah. Anything you noted, Nate, from all of that? I know it was a lot.
Yeah, no. So there is a I guess a few questions I wanted to lead you with. So one of the things that I always notice with these kind of like extreme malware, or not extreme malware, these extreme cybersecurity research stories, is 9 out of 10 times, and this is no different. It says your device already needs to be infected. And I think a lot of people, when they hear that, they're just kind of like, well, yeah, no, duh. At that point, like all the cards are off the table, right? So is there anything about this that you think like, okay, yes, fair, your device, like that's obviously bad, but this is still noteworthy because of whatever reason? Like, do you think there's something that still makes this noteworthy in spite of that?
Yeah, I think the main thing is just that like there are systems in place which are supposed to protect against this, even if you have malware on your computer. What um those systems are good or not is up for debate because I know a lot of open source people would say like, if something is restricting malware for like security reasons, then it's also probably restricting the user from doing things. So people have concerns about that. But overall, like there should be like proper sandboxing, proper separation between processes that are running on the computer that malware um, should be hindered. And so the fact that those protections aren't working in this case, I think is a concern for everyone involved. At the same time, it's tricky because like if you have malware on your computer, it is kind of a all bets are off situation, especially if it has like admin access basically. But at the same time, it's hard to like blame the people who have malware on their computer because they probably I mean they didn't do it intentionally, obviously. And education and can only go so far. There should be more systems in place that can protect against this and can protect against malware in general that don't require super invasive things like on Android, for example, that whole developer ID program. Like that's not a malware prevention tool, but like there are technical tools that these systems can implement. And I think given that this is like a Windows specific thing, I think that that's an indicator that somebody involved here could definitely be doing a lot better. Because if this was the case on other operating systems like Mac OS or Linux with Chromium, um, that would be a different story. I think that would be more Google's fault, but there's a lot of parties involved with in this case.
So on that note, aside from just not using Windows, Do you think there's any other defenses that you would recommend or like good practices to keep in mind?
It really is going to depend, I think, on, well, like everything, it comes down to your threat model, right? Like how concerned are you about your accounts, that sort of thing, because offloading passkeys and security keys off of your device entirely is going to be the most secure route, obviously. If you have like a YubiKey, for example, it's completely separate from the OS can't do anything about like getting the secrets off of it because that's entirely controlled by the computer on the YubiKey, which is separate. So that kind of like almost it's not air gapping because they're connected, but that separation of control basically between the devices, I think that's an obvious security benefit. The other stuff is to just use a reputable password manager instead of the browser password managers. I think that that's generally the way to go. It, like I said before, it's weird how much like Google kind of offloads that to the OS, and so it really depends on the OS how secure all of that data in your browser is in a lot of cases. Whereas usually a password manager, like the ones that we recommend, for example, they're going to handle their own encryption database. They're going to kind of implement everything themselves up to the highest security standards, at least in theory, and keeping it separate from like your browser. Just using a different program, using a extension rather than directly integrating it into the browser. I think that that's going to have security benefits overall. So yeah, exactly. Exactly like Dag Overhauls just said. Just don't. That's the main thing. I think, even if you're going to keep using Windows, you got to switch to a different password manager, like a dedicated tool, because a web browser is not a dedicated password manager, even though it can save passwords. The main, that's not the main thing. They're missing a lot of features. It's not great.
Yeah, I had that comment highlighted too. I was about to bring that up. So, um, I had one more question written down here, and I feel like we've said this several times, but just to put it in plain English. So, I mean, I think some people are still passkeys are a little older than we realize. I think they're like 4 or 5 years old at this point, but it still feels like tech moves so fast. It feels like they just dropped like last year. So, would is this just to again to really drive the point home? Is this anything to do with passkeys? Would you be like, oh, people shouldn't use passkeys, or like, no, you should still use passkeys despite this? So,
I think people should definitely still use passkeys. They're I mean, this is definitely another reason to not use passkeys because passwords are going to be um, much worse at all this stuff. And passkeys protect against a lot of stuff that's not local malware. They protect against like phishing attacks. They protect against um, like passwords being leaked in data breaches. Hopefully, that's not an issue for a lot of people because you should be using a different password on each site. But sharing passwords is still a problem. So that stuff being released in a data breach is of great concern for a lot of people. And so passkeys definitely raise the bar significantly. Um, at the same time, it is still like passkeys are a single factor, right? And this is an annoying thing I think about passkeys for me. It's that a lot of the times they don't let you do two-factor authentication anymore if you have passkeys enabled, which is not my favorite setup because I would like to have like a password in my password manager and then a separate security key I plug in to have like two forms of authentication. And a lot of the times that's kind of being taken away as passkeys get implemented, but that's kind of more for the more extreme side of things. And I think that if that is a concern to you, using like a dedicated security key and keeping passkeys out of any password manager at all is probably the way for you to go. But if it's between passwords and passkeys and you're not gonna like use a separate security key 2FA or you want to keep all of that out of the equation, passkeys are just 100% better than passwords in every way. So I think they're very cool, and I think people should be using them unless they have a really good reason not to be.
for sure. Um, yeah, that was all I had on that story. Did I miss anything you wanted to cover?
I don't think so. It's kind of a lot, but typical Microsoft, Google stuff. This is why you can't put all your eggs in one big tech basket.
For sure. All right. Well, let's jump into some site updates. So many of you are probably familiar with the joke that this is the year of the Linux desktop, but in a little bit, we're actually going to discuss a story how we might be headed in that direction. Maybe depends on who you ask and how you read the data. But first, yeah, we're going to give some quick updates about what we've been working on at Privacy Guides this week. The first thing that I'm excited to share with you guys is that our video about Bull Run, which is in case you guys haven't noticed, we're kind of doing a bit of a series on the so-called crypto wars, which is like all the ways that mostly the US government, but governments in general, have tried to attack cybersecurity and cryptography and tried to make sure that nobody gets any privacy on the internet anymore. And this is our next installment. It's about the NSA program called Bull Run, and it's pretty wild. It was something we learned about. I mean, it started way before Snowden, but we learned about it in 2013 with Edward Snowden, and we just kind of dive into what it was, what it impacted, what how did it shape our modern world today. I think I've said this before in previous episodes, but I love, the older I get, the more I love learning about history, because a lot of it is really like, oh, this is how we got here, and this explains so much, and now I understand why things are the way they are. And this was yet another one that did that for me. So right now it is members only. I think in a few days it will go out to the public, but personal bias, I think it's worth paying for. I mean, our membership is like what, $5 a month, $10 a month, something like that. I think it's pretty cool. I spend that much on bougie coffee, to be totally honest. So I think it's worth it. But yeah, that's coming out, and we've kind of hinted a little bit that we are releasing a Flock video soon. There's a Flock National Week of Action coming out. What is it? August like 17th through, of course, I don't know how to use the calendar on the Mac. But not next week, but the week after. And we're going to have that video out in time for that. And I'm excited to share that with you guys. But yeah, that's what's been going on the video side of things. And I will let Jonah take over to discuss any site updates or anything else.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I've been gone pretty much all week on this trip doing DEF CON stuff, so not much in terms of site or community stuff on my end, but of course, there's all sorts of stuff going on the forum all the time. We have Freya posting news articles, so I know we have a bunch of good stuff that was out at privacyguides.org/news. Typically, that's where we're going to publish some news stories that maybe don't make it onto the show, or just extra stuff that we don't have time to talk about, or maybe that we didn't see a lot of attention about in the forum or the community that we thought we should highlight. So that's the kind of stuff that gets published. There's an article about Spectre coming back, similar CPU issues, and some mitigations affect that. Some mitigations for Spectre were found to be ineffective. North Korean hackers breached over 1,600 organizations worldwide. WhatsApp is testing age verification. CISO releases guidance urging water treatment facilities to disconnect equipment from the internet. Those stories you can read about, again, at privacyguides.org/news. There's also, just before the show, Nate published the latest data breach roundup, which we publish every week to kind of keep people up to date with the data breaches we've seen, and just to remind people how frequent they are and how, again, important it is to use like a password manager and keep all of those separate. Use an email aliasing service. Try not to share information between accounts if you can, because these data breaches are just constant, and you don't want that data to be used to like build a profile against you or hack your other accounts or anything like that. So yeah.
Before we move out of the site updates, I know you said you've been busy this week, so maybe there are no updates, but John, last name, just asked if there's any news on the app verification thing that we've been building.
Yeah, I've been working on some stuff for the app locally, but I think we'll be able to publish it. I'll be able to finish it soon. Mainly just streamlining the submission workflow and getting some more of that done so we can do it quicker. But it's just taking a bit to actually finish like these scripts and stuff. And also I've been pretty busy this month, but hopefully next week I will no longer be as busy as I have been, and we'll have time to get that finished up.
Cool. Alrighty. Yeah, all this is made possible by our supporters. You can sign up for a membership or donate at privacyguides.org, or you can pick up some swag at shop.privacyguides.org. We do still have our merch store up and running. Privacy Guides is a nonprofit which researches and shares privacy related information and facilitates a community on our forum and matrix where people can ask questions and get advice about staying private online and preserving their digital rights. And now we're going to talk about how a Bitcoin cold wallet was compromised and how you can avoid that.
This is a crazy story. So, I wrote about this on our news site last week because that was kind of when this was all breaking, and at the time, it was nearly 1,400 Bitcoin were hacked from Coldcard wallets, which is a hardware wallet made by the company CoinKite. In the middle of the night on January 30th, $70.2 million worth of Bitcoin were stolen from addresses that were created by Coldcard Coldcard wallets. There was a firmware bug in these wallets which weakened the recovery phrases or the seed phrases that were generated by many of their devices, which allowed an attacker to reconstruct those private keys without needing physical access to the device in the first place. So typically, when you create a Bitcoin wallet, the device that you use is going to generate a random seed, and it's going to turn that into a recovery phrase, and that kind of is your secret key. That's your private key that protects all of your funds. And if anyone discovers that seed phrase or recovery key, then they will own your wallet and have access to it and can do transactions and stuff. So generally how it works with these wallets is it's going to use like a random number generator and come up with like a completely random key that could never be guessed in, you know, in any amount of time. They should be unbreakable if they're completely random. And Coldcard, in theory, was designed to generate seeds with at least 128 bits of entropy. I believe, yeah, we have Nate, you made a password video on our channel where we kind of explain entropy a bit more in terms of like password strength and stuff, but it's a very similar concept where like the more entropy you have, the more random your uh, your password or your private key or whatever private thing you're trying to protect, the more random it is, the more unguessable it is, basically. And 128 bits of entropy is very significant. It's effectively impossible to search every possible seed. So the bug in Coldcard wallets was basically the firmware that they had installed, and this was right after they switched from being open source to being closed source. This change was made that basically disabled that random number generator being used, which is crazy. And it used a non-secure software fallback instead to generate these keys. So CoinKite says that the older products that they have, the MK2 and MK3 devices, may have produced seeds with only about 40 bits of entropy, which is extremely small. The newer ones, MK4, MK5Q devices that they sold may have generated seeds with about 72 bits of entropy. Even that is still within the realm of like powerful computers. So I didn't have this in the article, but I believe I read like a lot of what was being used to generate the keys with no random number generator involved was just the current date that it was being generated and the serial number of the devices. That those were like big factors in figuring those out, was probably not super difficult, would dramatically reduce the amount of searching that you need to do, that an attacker would need to do to guess those private keys. So basically, since the keys were very not random, the attacker could use that information and they could generate a ton of recovery phrases on their own, using the same technique that the cold cards were using. And then when they generated them, they would just check on the blockchain whether those addresses they just made already had cryptocurrency in them because they were in use by a cold card user. And eventually, any of them that they found that did have balances, they basically stole them. And I think all of this happened within like less than an hour time frame originally. A lot of people suspect that basically what was happening is the attacker like found out about this quite a while ago, and then they've just been generating a ton of keys ever since. And then once they had collected enough, they kind of drained all of the wallets all at once before people had time to react. Um, so yeah, they basically by doing that, because like the recovery keys themselves were fundamentally flawed, you didn't need access to the wallet. They didn't need any physical access. They didn't need access to the owner's computer. They didn't need any of that because they didn't like hack the wallet physically itself. They just were not secure in the first place and could be attacked remotely. So anyways, Coldcard Security Advisory says that they're all impacted and they've released a firmware update which fixes the problem when generating new keys. But if you install that firmware update and you're on the old keys, they're not going to be fixed because it's not an issue with the device itself. It's an issue with the seed phrase. The last thing I would say, I think since writing this article, reading all of this news, I've read recently that the number of Bitcoin stolen is like approaching $130 million now. I think what's happening is even though the attacker like drained a ton of wallets right away, I think other people are now like opportunistically also doing this and trying to drain as many as they can now that like random hackers also know about this issue. So I think we're just seeing like a lot of different attackers now trying to drain all of these wallets. So I would imagine like hopefully Coldcard customers have already heard about this and have moved their funds to a different wallet. If you haven't, hopefully you do that and it's not too late. But I would imagine quite a few of these wallets are impacted, and it's a huge problem. I mean, yeah, 70 to 130 million dollars worth of Bitcoin. That's people people probably had quite significant savings in these devices and they thought they were being secure. And it's just it's a shame because they like if you're using these products, you kind of think that you're doing everything right because they're touted as the most secure products in the world and they should be, handling all of this properly. And if people don't have physical access to that hardware wallet, you're supposed to be safe. And this is just a case where Coldcard really, really messed up a lot. And I don't know. There's kind of no coming back from that. It's really unfortunate for anyone impacted.
So let me ask you, because I've gotten conflicting answers on this. In your opinion, I guess I'll say this outright. Like, do you even think most people need a hardware wallet? Like, I know it's considered like the ultimate in security, but like, I don't know. Is it really like all it's cracked up to be?
Um, you know what? I definitely think it makes sense to have a dedicated device for it. If you have like significant crypto holdings. Listen, I'm not gonna like say everyone needs to buy crypto, right? But whoever's listening, if you already have crypto, if you have more than like $1,000 or $2,000 worth of crypto, it probably makes sense because they're not super expensive. And anything that you can do to kind of separate the private keys away from the rest of your computer is a good thing. It's exactly the sort of thing like if you encrypt, I mean, not encrypt, but if you protect your accounts online with a dedicated security key because you don't want your passwords or your TOTP codes on your phone, your computer because of malware, for example, it's the exact same sort of protection that these hardware wallets are going to provide. If you have an old phone, I know that Cake Wallet has like a cupcake app that kind of turns an old phone into a hardware wallet, sort of. That's not going to be, I mean, if you keep that phone in airplane mode and you don't use it for anything else, that's probably going to be pretty secure. So that could be something to look into if you have something laying around and you don't want to buy a hardware wallet. But if you're going to use that phone for other things, then that wouldn't be more secure than a hardware wallet. So it's just if you have a dedicated device handy, that's an option. But otherwise, yeah, hardware wallets are pretty. I mean, you can get perfectly fine ones for like $60 or something. So they're it's probably worth it from a security perspective, especially if you have like large amounts of money stored in your
Okay.
crypto wallets.
but it's more about the fact that it's like securely storing your keys in a separate spot where they're not supposed to be, or they're supposed to be less susceptible to compromise. So
Yeah, because in
okay.
theory, um, like it's just they'll typically have like a separate screen too, so you can like see what they're doing, so like the software doesn't lie to you. Because we've also seen a lot of like malware cases where malware on your computer will just replace QR codes that are in your browser if you're trying to send somebody money, or they'll like replace the addresses, and it's really hard to tell if that's happening. So that those kind of like phishing attempts basically get a lot of people, and just having a device where you can independently verify all of that information um, is also a useful tool. So yeah, I do think they make sense. That's at the end of the day.
Okay, cool. Um, that's probably all I got on that story. Jordan says hardware wallet review when.
Yeah, you know what? There's a lot of discussions on the forum right now. I'm looking into a lot of different hardware wallets at the moment, and that is a planned category on the site in the future. Hopefully, it's not too long actually. So, if anyone has hardware wallet opinions, um, leave them on the forum. But there aren't too many options that like support Monero, so that kind of narrows down the recommendations quite a bit.
That's fair. Yeah, we're pretty big fans of Monero back here. All right. If that's all we've got on that story, I will move into some potentially exciting news. The Linux desktop market share has surpassed 10% in North America. And it does seem like this might be kind of legit because this comes from two different sources. So this comes from StatCounter and as well as Cloudflare. And for context, they said, so this was July of 2026. For context, they said that StatCounter had 10.65% desktop usage for July, but in June, it was only 5.52%. So it basically doubled. Windows is still the dominant desktop operating system, 57%. And then OS X and Mac OS continue to hold a substantial market share as well. However, they do note here that they said the sharp monthly increase needs context. StatCounter's June figures include an unknown category that accounted for 9.24% of North America usage. The reduction seems to have coincided with Linux rise. I don't see it here on the screenshot here, but possibly indicating better identification of previously unclassified traffic. It's also worth noting that where did it go? It explains here that the way that StatCounter bases its statistics on page views from its analytics network, which cover 1 million websites and processes more than 3 billion page views monthly. The company measures usage by page views rather than counting unique users or installed systems. Its figures update daily and may be revised during a 45-day quality assurance period. Cloudflare is the other one who recorded a major jump over usage, and I honestly can't really make sense of their map here that they've got in the screenshot, but yeah, it looks like Linux is, if I'm reading this correctly, it looks like it's sitting at just under 10% there. It looks like 9.4%. My screen is kind of squished, so it shows up okay on mobile, so I'm having a hard time reading that, but very similar numbers. But they say that Cloudflare Radar derives its distribution information from HTTP requests observed across Cloudflare's global network, which unfortunately is way bigger than it should be, but in this case probably gives us a fairly accurate or fairly comprehensive is what I wanted to say. It does say neither source should be seen as a literal census showing exactly 1 in 10 North American desktops run Linux, but it's a relative share of observable web activity linked to different operating systems. So yeah. And actually, Pooh said over here in the comments, like, those Linux desktops could be bots. So yeah, this is definitely not like a perfect, like they said, it doesn't mean that 1 in 10 Americans is now running, or North Americans is now running Linux. But it does, it's still cool because even if they manage to, just refine their statistics a little better, and now it's like, oh, we figured out a lot of those unknowns are Linux. It does still show that there has been an improvement in Linux, which I will say, this is not necessarily an endorsement, of course, but Gardner Bryant posted a video this week about this article, And he kind of talked about why are we seeing a rise in Linux. And I think he made some really good points that we're seeing, like Windows is just getting steadily worse by the day, constantly pumping in new ads, constantly pumping in AI garbage. I don't know if I said this on the podcast, but recently my sister has a very old, very small just laptop that she bought off somebody. It's like a used laptop. And I remoted into her computer one night and I like uninstalled Copilot. I uninstalled a bunch of crap. It was mostly uninstalling stuff. I ran updates. I got her on the extended updates. Her computer can't do Windows 11, but like I went through all of it and took me a couple hours. And then like the next week she texted me and she's like, "Oh my God, this computer is so much faster. Thank you." Like she was literally about to buy a new computer, which I'm like, I love new computers as much as the next person, but right now prices are so high. Like if I were you, I would put it off as long as possible, at least until you stop getting security updates. And yeah, I think now she's at a point where she's like, okay, I can work with this for a little while longer. So, yeah, like Linux is doing that, or excuse me, Windows is doing that. And then Linux is becoming, I think the software side of Linux is becoming a lot more mature. We're seeing like it mentions here in the article that with the Steam Deck, which does run Arch Linux, that means a lot more games are now Linux compatible. So, a lot more hobby things are doable on Linux. For better or worse, a lot of things have moved into the browser. So just a lot of the day-to-day activities you need can be easily done on Linux as long as you have a good browser, which the browsers we recommend work on all operating systems. So it's basically, I think the barrier to entry to Linux is coming down. And again, it's not one of our recommended distros, but I know Zorin OS had a moment because when you install it, I believe there's it's been a while since I've tinkered with it, but I believe there's literally an option to say like, oh, I want it to look like Windows or I want it to look like Mac. So if you're coming from Windows or Mac, it's a very smooth or at least smoother transition for people to have something that's familiar and they're used to it and just to kind of ease them into the world of Linux. And it's just the barrier to entry to Linux is coming down. And I think that's super exciting. So even if this doesn't necessarily show that like, oh my God, Linux usage doubled, like again, maybe we just got better at classifying it, but I think it is really cool to see that it has been on a steady growth pattern and to understand why that is. But yeah, I think those are kind of all my thoughts on this story. Did I miss anything that you wanted to add?
I don't think so. To be honest with you, I did not know Cloudflare Radar did this. It's kind of neat. This graph. It is very funny that you can look at the graph and you can see exactly when people get to work and start using Windows computers every day.
Yeah, I didn't know about the Cloudflare thing either, but that made me feel a little better because yeah, when I remember I shared this article in our little production chat, and we all kind of had the same thought that it's like, okay, but we know stat counter is not always reliable, and it's kind of a little bit of a biased metric. Like, how much do we trust this? And then when I found out, it's like, oh no, there's other data supporting this. It's like, okay, that's interesting. So
Yeah, I don't know what to make of this Cloudflare data. I guess their average right now is 8.6%, which is probably the most accurate because like during the day it gets, I mean, they basically measure like requests on a hour by hour basis, right? So it's kind of wildly changing how many people are using Linux at any given time. But it is interesting stuff. It's good to see growth. I do have to wonder. I've never have understood where Stats Counter gets their data from. I still don't, but um, it's weird. I like how many websites are installing the Stats Counter tracking. Where are they getting this data? I've always been very confused by them.
yeah, I mean, according to the article, it's some kind of analytics network. So you also got to wonder how many Linux users aren't showing up on that because they're privacy conscious people that are blocking analytics like that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I mean that's a huge thing. Like just ad blockers in general. I know a long time ago now I would run what was that? It used to be called Pewik. Now it's Matomo Analytics, and they did like a pretty extensive breakdown of like what devices people were using and operating systems and stuff like that. And Windows was even on like very Linux specific pages and like Linux specific websites. Windows was a huge component of that, and Linux barely got any just because most people were just not being tracked in the first place because their browsers would just block that sort of script. So I do think that is a huge component too. And that might be a reason that Cloudflare is better because better uh, at least detecting this kind of stuff because they can look at like actual headers being sent. They're not running a script on your device to try and find out what operating system you're running.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, it's a double-edged sword of Cloudflare is they're so ubiquitous that it becomes a bit of a problem, but it also gives us good analytics like that. So
Yeah, and on-site it's actually 20% market share because they're not being tracked. Could be, you never know. I mean, honestly, that is a problem in a lot of respect with privacy, respecting things, because I think in a lot of businesses, the executives up top, they want to see a nice dashboard with numbers of like what people are doing. And if you're, being private and you're blocking that sort of thing, you're just being underrepresented in those stats, which then, but see, I don't know what the solution to that is besides companies should just stop collecting this data in the first place and stop relying on it so much.
fair enough. Yeah, I have nothing to add to that, and that was actually our last story. So I think that brings us into the open floor. If anybody has any last minute questions.
Q&A or yeah, I don't know. Have you seen any forum posts this week?
There was another forum post I saw earlier today that I thought was pretty cool that was talking about how cash is king. And yeah, it literally says PSA cash is king. And they're like, I feel like this doesn't get the discussion it deserves. I rarely see it mentioned, but we already have a way to transact anonymously in person, stop giving banks info about our spending habits, support small businesses, and support cash itself. It actually, I listened to a podcast called How to Money, and probably about 6 months ago at this point, but they had somebody on there, maybe like a year ago actually, but they had somebody on there relatively recently who was talking about how important cash is and how important it is that we don't get rid of a cashless, or we don't transition to a cashless society. And he did mention privacy a little bit, but that wasn't even like his main big point. He had like so many other reasons, but yeah, cash doesn't get enough love. I mean, obviously it's not great for everything, like specifically online purchases. They did point out that there's, if you mail in cash somewhere and it turns out to be a scam, you can't just call the bank and go, hey, this was a scam, I need my money back. But it's in like person to person stuff, it's cash is really good for things like budgeting. Like a classic way to budget is you literally have envelopes that like, okay, this is our grocery budget, this is for the power bill, this is for this. And yeah, I mean, there's so many advantages to cash, like not just privacy advantages, but I don't know. Sorry, I kind of launched into that one, but that one caught my attention earlier today. I was like, oh, maybe this one. Pooh Bear said that uBlock Origin can't block Cloudflare's analytics. That's interesting.
Yeah, because they're based on like the headers being sent, HTTP headers. So you'd have to like spoof those basically. Like something like a multi browser or Tor browser would hide some information from them. I'll check the supporter signal. We have a signal chat for members of Privacy Guides. If anyone donates and wants to join, let me know. But that's a cool thing. We have a good amount of people in there. Talk about stuff. Not sure if we have
I'm
any
trying to get
questions
better about
though.
checking it. I haven't seen any. I was gonna say I try to check it a little more often now because now I've got it set up on other devices, like so I can have it during the stream and stuff. And yeah, I'd say I check it about twice a day, and usually there's messages, so it's pretty active. Oh yes, I'm going through the forum posts. John Oliver did an episode about police surveillance technology this week. So even if you don't like John Oliver, like that could be a good episode to send to your friends and family just to kind of familiarize them with this stuff and what some of the issues are. So. Yeah.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, probably can wrap things up for the day. I think we covered a bunch of stuff. Do you want to take our last stuff here? Well, which episode of John Oliver? It was just a week ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the most recent one. I'm checking YouTube right now.
It was
John
called
Oliver. Let's see. Yeah, it's the most recent one. It's literally called Police Surveillance Technology. Last week tonight with John
yeah.
Oliver. 4 days ago.
Check it
2.4
out.
million views. Woo! So awesome. Word's getting out. I love it. But yeah, so all the updates from this week in privacy will be shared on the blog every week. So sign up for the newsletter or subscribe with your favorite RSS reader if you want to stay tuned. For people who prefer audio, we also offer a podcast available on all podcast platforms and RSS, and this video will be synced to PeerTube. Privacy Guides is an impartial, nonprofit organization that is focused on building a strong privacy advocacy community and delivering the best digital privacy and consumer technology rights advice on the internet. If you want to support our mission, you can make a donation on our website at privacyguides.org. To make a donation, click the red heart icon located in the top right corner of the page. You can contribute using standard fiat currency via debit or credit card, or you can opt to donate anonymously using Monero or your favorite cryptocurrency. Becoming a paid member unlocks exclusive perks like early access to video content, priority during the live stream Q&A, private community, early access to the show notes, and a cool badge on your profile in the Privacy Guides forum and the warm, fuzzy feeling of supporting independent media. So thank you all for watching, and we'll be back next week.
Thanks, everyone.